Good morning. This morning I'm going to be talking about one of the poetry or poems that Rumi wrote. I was going to give you some biography and history about Rumi, and we have such limited time here on Sunday mornings, so rather than to do that, I'll share a few words about him, but there's a wonderful website called Rumi.net, R-U-M-I.net, that if you're interested in his life, and he led a very interesting life, you might want to spend some time this afternoon, go to that website and read more about him. He was a 13th century Persian poet. He was an Islamic scholar, a theologian, and most notably known as a Sufi mystic. He was born September 30th in 1207 in present day, what's called Afghanistan, and he died December 17th, 1273 in Turkey at the age of 66. So back in that time, he lived to a ripe old age. So he wrote a poem called Soul. I'm going to read the poem to you first and then take certain sections from it that I think you'll enjoy. It's it's not scholarly, it's not academic. From an esoteric point of view, it's pretty, easy to understand. But I wanted you to see how you can read Rumi's poetry in light of the ageless wisdom and, our nomenclature. So let me read his poem first. He says, "Merge yourself in the community and know the joy of the soul. Enter the streets of ruin with those who drink to the dregs. I think it's D-R-E-G-S, dregs, right? Okay. Empty the glass of your desire so that you are not disgraced. Close both the eyes in your head and find the inner eye. Open your arms if you want an embrace. Break the idol of clay and behold the radiance. Why get tired to a hag like this world? And for such a price, and for a ration of 3 loaves, why think of the sword and knife? All night the beloved always returns. Take no opium tonight. Close your mouth to food and know another taste. The cupbearer is no tyrant. His gathering is a circle. Come into the circle. Sit down beyond the turning of time. Here is the bargain. Give 1 life and receive 100. Stop behaving like dogs and experience the shepherd's care. You complain of someone who took what you had? Well, forget him for the presence of him. Think of nothing but the source of thought. The source of thought. Care of the soul is more than your hunger for bread. Why in this wide world do you sleep in a prison? Avoid complicated thinking. The explanation is in the higher worlds. Limit your talk for the sake of eternal communication. Abandon life and the world and find the life of the world." Powerful, isn't it? So let's start with this first paragraph of the poem. Merge yourself in the community and know the joy of the soul. Enter the streets of ruin with those who drink to the dregs Empty the glass of your desire so that you are not disgraced. Okay, so what I'm sharing with you is just the tip of the iceberg. You know, you can take the ideas and really develop them. But in this, Rumi is telling us to engage in selfless service. And when we engage in this selfless service means we have no agenda, we have no underlying motive, we don't want anything in return. We're just serving for the sake of service. We're serving the soul, meaning serving the needs, of that person or that family or that nation. And when we do this, we will experience the joy of our soul. To merge ourselves in the community means to merge our heart with the hearts and consciousness of our family, our group, our country, and humanity. And from that point, we're going to serve. See, he's saying don't get lost in the dregs of the planet. In other words, don't get lost in the materialism. Don't get lost in our opinions. Don't get lost in revenge and hatred and malice and the hurts and depression of the past. But instead to merge our heart, our pure hearts, with the hearts of others. When we merge with the heart of humanity, we are also merging with the soul of hierarchy. The soul of hierarchy. In order to merge with the heart of any group, we must first eliminate our false masks. When you think about this morning's meditation on freedom, you can take the questions that we were asked to think about as seed thoughts and kind of overlay this statement, eliminating the false masks. Most people do wear false masks. What is challenging for us, people who have pure hearts, pure motives, who serve the soul of others, is that they have to practice tolerance and patience and understanding as those false masks of people are expressing themselves. Oftentimes, the false masks that people have created are so ingrained in their sense of self that a pure-hearted soul will have to penetrate through like a straight arrow, like our teachers, when they speak to us with a straight arrow. Now, what that means is, what kind of pressure are they going to put behind that arrow when they are directing it through the false masks of the expression of that individual? If that person is a disciple and is not touchy and allows him or herself to be vulnerable to change, vulnerable to transformation, then as that teacher releases the arrow from the bow, it's going to go straight to the heart of the problem. But if that the false masks of that person are controlling their life, then the release of that arrow must be gentle. See, if it penetrates too sharply into the reality of that person's false self-image, then there will be a reaction. The reaction of that person will be based on the control of their glamours and illusions and Maya. And when they function under that kind of control, then all they will do when that arrow strikes them is to react. It's like with our children. When I was a young mother and raising two beautiful boys, they were beautiful until they became teens. And, and then trying to understand, how do you handle a teenager? Well, back in the day, in my day, parents had the freedom to spank, as a punishment, which I never did, but their father did a couple of times. And taking those incidences now as adults, all they could remember was the spanking. Had no idea, why the spanking. And of course now, spanking a kid can send you to court, for abuse and so forth. So taking that, into consideration when you're a teacher or a friend or a co-worker that wants to help in the transformational process of a personality, you need to know what kind of pressure to release that arrow through the false mask, so that little by little by little by little, that false mask drops and they see their light. They see what their true image is. Going on. Close both the eyes in your head, he wrote, and find the inner eye. Open your arms if you want an embrace. Break the idol of clay and behold the radiance. Why get tied to a hag like this world? Isn't that great? I just love that, this hag of a world, And for such a price. And for a ration of 3 loaves, why think of the sword and knife? So what is the inner eye? The inner eye is the eye of the soul. It is the eye of wisdom. It can be the pure expression and radiance of the solar angel expressing itself through you, through your heart, through your words, through your speech. As we steep ourselves deeper into matter, it becomes increasingly difficult to see life through our inner eye. See, it's those false masks, those false images. And there comes a time and point in our lives where we are so, discouraged, disturbed, disgusted, in despair, all the D's, about life and the functioning of our life and the situations in our life and so on and so forth, that we finally begin to seek truth. Once we find truth, for the first few years, it's a great romance. It is exciting, it's beautiful, it's wonderful. We find like-minded co-workers and we're excited. And now life is like a rainbow of colors. It's so beautiful. And like any new romance, we eventually have to face the concreteness of these false images that are false masks that we have created in ourselves. And this is what the teaching does. If we study the teaching, if we apply the teaching, it's like I was reading, we are presenting a new publication that will be out hopefully by the end of this week. It's called the Agni Yoga Quarterly. And one of the first articles is How to Study Agni Yoga. And all of this is from, of course, the teachings of Agni Yoga. And in there, the master is saying how to read. And when we read in the morning versus studying and reading at night, we perceive our perceptions of what we are studying from different angles. If we are in a difficult situation and we try to find that situation of the teaching, our understanding of what we read is different. So in other words, he's saying, metaphorically in this case, begin to look at that relationship, your relationship with yourself, your relationship with God, your relationship with your family, with your co-workers, with life in general, from many different angles, from the point of view when you wake up in the morning to when you go to sleep at night, in the afternoon, when you're at work. Think of the teaching. How do you apply the teaching when you are not healthy, when you are angry, when you are exhausted? Where do we put the teaching in our life? At that point. The more we exercise the muscles of the soul, the deeper we will understand how to apply the teaching. The deeper we are able to understand how to put the teaching into our life means we are now functioning with that inner eye, or the eye of the soul. As we grow into adulthood, we become too easily distracted by the coarse world. And without realizing it, we become tied to the world of dense matter. As Rumi calls it, the hag of this world. He is saying our purpose in life is to serve the good, serve the beautiful or beauty in others. But when we serve the beauty in others, what happens is their ugliness is there, but we're not focused on their ugliness. We're focused on the potential of their soul. The light, the love, the power, the virtue of the soul, the way Val was reading in our meditation this morning. When you are engaged in a communication or a relationship with one another, and your focus, you have a soul focus on the love and the will and the beauty and the power and the virtue of the soul in that person, their ugliness fades away. Their dregs of the world fade away. The hag. The hags fade away. Okay. Every time we desire something, we build the forms of the desire around us. And these forms follow us day and night, affecting our thinking, our emotions, and actions, but we cannot see them. However, when we learn how to enter higher planes of consciousness, see, when we move our consciousness from the dregs of our life, from the minutiae of life, from the ugliness and the difficulties and the baggage that we carry with us. What did Torquem used to call it? Our donkey tails, they just get longer and longer and longer. Once we start removing all of the debris that we have magnetically brought onto us, that's when, as a soul, more light is released. We move into higher planes of consciousness. And what happens when we have the ability to expand our consciousness to where we can step out consciously onto the astral plane, this is when we can absolutely see all the forms of our desires hanging around us. It's shocking. What's so shocking is that when you see these forms, oftentimes and most oftentimes, the forms are incomplete. You haven't created a perfectly constructed desire. So when these desires manifest in form, they are incomplete desires. It's very interesting to think about. When you say, look it, I prayed to God day after day after day, hour after hour after hour, to bring this man or to bring this woman to me. And look what I have. He's poor, he's stupid, he's self-centered, and now I'm married to him. I thought God sent this relationship to me. Well, your desire was incomplete. So when you are able to move into or onto the astral plane and have the purity of the soul, the purity of the heart, to see all these fragmented forms, it's like, oh, now I understand. And then we begin to go back into the teachings and read more about what a glamour is. See what happens, we're so never going to get there. I've got a half a page I've read through now, my notes. But this is what happens. We know that, for example, these forms of our desires that are now so intense and so permeated in our thinking and emotional nature, now they've like globbed on to one of our centers, usually the solar plexus, sacral center, those two centers. And now, because they're incomplete, entities that are drawn to similar desires glob on or attach themselves to these incomplete forms, increase our desire, and add anger and disappointment and depression. So we're feeding one another. The entity is trying to nurture itself from our desire, which activates our confused emotional body and thinking, and it sends us to the drugstore to order all different kinds of drugs, or we go to the doctor to get prescriptions for this and that, and then we're in trouble because we're so identified with the hags, the dregs of the world, which is our life, our world. Interesting, isn't it? These desires stay with us from one life to the next and the next, creating hell-like conditions for us. Why hell-like conditions because they are not in harmony with our soul. And the various desires themselves are in conflict with one another. They have conflicting existences. The conflict is the possessing and obsessing entities that are now attached to our incomplete desires and forms. And now we've got major conflicts going on. Particularly when we get into the teachings, whether it's the ageless wisdom teaching or religion, we move into that field of thinking and erroneously believe now we're saved and our life will be perfect. You know, I'm on the path of the teaching. Oh, finally, my life is going to straighten itself out magically. I'm going to be perfect and live happily ever after. It doesn't seem to work like that because more is required from us to see ourselves clearly, to get rid of the false masks, to begin to break down these incompleted forms of our desires and replace them with the things that the teachings have told us of virtues. To start with the virtues, like, you know, or the principles, like beauty and freedom, joy, and so forth. These conflicting existences, they are conflicting existences, and we cannot harmonize them, nor can we destroy them until they exhaust the energy with which we built them. Of course, the ugliest desires are those related to greed and exaggerated pleasure, money, sex, alcohol and drugs, possession, crimes, and positions. Sometimes people who know how to travel into the astral world will enter there and help those who have died and are still living their lives through their desires. Such people will awaken these souls so that they can move on. Their desires are so very strong that they do not even know they have died, especially those who die suddenly. I'm going to start skipping through some of what I prepared to talk about so I can get to the most essential. Okay, Rumi says, the cupbearer is no tyrant. His gathering is a circle. Come into the circle, sit down beyond the turning of time. Here's the bargain, give one life and receive 100. A cupbearer, this is very interesting. I did some research on it, and I won't get into the biblical research of it because I didn't resonate to it. But what I did resonate to was this, that a cupbearer is considered a spiritual leader, one who is offering the spiritual life to those who are searching for the love and beauty of God. We know that the soul is the pathway to God. The cupbearer, no, I'm not going to do that. Never mind. Sorry. The cupbearer nourishes others so that they in turn can also nourish others with their light. See, not with their false images, not with their anger, not with their despair, not with their hatred and disgust and so on and so forth. They're going to nourish others with their light. Imagine being around such a person. Wow, what a gift. So they nourish others with their light until a gathering of disciples occur. Light bearers are those who take their light out into the world for the Lord of the world. We must gather around the cupbearer, around the teaching, in order to transform all that is not made of light, before we can take the pure light out into the world. He says in his poem, stop behaving like dogs and experience the shepherd's care. You complain of someone who took what you had? Well, forget him for the presence of him, capital H, him. Think of nothing but the source of thought. Care of the soul is more than your hunger for bread. So this is a reminder that we must take care of our soul and live in the presence of the capital S, self. Most of us are more concerned about hunger. See, hunger is not just, McDonald's. Sorry. It is the hunger of our desires. And he is saying, we must take care of our soul and not be so concerned about our hunger. It is actually ironic, for if we first take care of the soul, then our earthly needs are going to be provided for. And I have to share this story. For example, there's a story about the life of St. Sergius. St. Sergius was born in May of 1314, and he died September 25th at the age of 78. He died in 1392. Miracles continued to be attributed to his great spirit. He is considered a patron saint by some, and also an incarnation of a particular master by others. Once his monastery was without bread for 2 days. And some of the monks asked St. Sergius if they could go to the neighboring villages and ask for bread. They also stated that they would not return because they could not bear the poverty and lack of food in the monastery. St. Sergius responded through the words of Matthew, saying, "Therefore I tell you, do not be anxious about your life, what you shall eat or what you shall drink, nor about your body, nor what you shall put on. Is life more than food, and the body more than clothing?" He told them that they were being tested and said that, quote, "Although you now do not have any bread, tomorrow God will give you all that you need," unquote. As he was talking to the monks, a person knocked on the door of the monastery, bringing 2 full carts of bread and food. St. Sergius did not eat anything, but went instead to thank God. Only after giving thanks did he bless the breads and distribute them to the entire community. See, when we think of, okay, I'm waiting for God, to fill the coffers, we don't see how God will direct his disciples to send, in this case, 2 carts of bread and food to those that were members of that monastery, to the disciples of Christ. Isn't it interesting? So, what does it mean to take care of the soul? You know, I'm going to stop here. Cliffhanger, right? And we're going to continue with this next week. Okay?